How's everyone feeling?
You?
Yeah, better. Yes.
Yeah.
Yoshi's been plying me with Japanese medicines.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
What did you get?
I don't know. Strange bottles. Strange tasting
Red
liquids.
bottle.
Red bottle, yes.
Hope he's a true doctor.
Ah.
Yeah.
Ginseng is mostly what that red bottle is. Yes.
そうそう、人参です。
朝鮮人参ね。
Good to hear. Yeah.
Okay, I might as well begin. So, last time we left off in the middle of book 4, and I'll just do a very slight recap of that, and then I'll explain why I'm going to take the approach I'm going to take today. And I gather what we're going to do is I'm going to do the class as it's regularly done for the first hour and a half, and we'll take our break as usual. And then after the break, we're going to have some kind of colloquium. Is that my correct understanding? Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, so last class, as I say, we stopped roughly in the middle of book 4. And I'll just remind you of what we've done so far. So we had book 1, which was a dialectic, that is to say, a conversation between Socrates and people who had different views. We had Cephalus, Polemarchus, Thrasymachus. And what was the major topic of book 1? What was the major thing that they were interested in? One word. Each of these 3 gave a definition of something that becomes the focus of the entire conversation for the next several books.
Justice.
Justice, exactly. So it becomes focused as a conversation about justice. And Socrates refutes Cephalus, he refutes Polemarchus, he refutes Thrasymachus, and book 1 ends. And book 2 begins. And who takes over the discussion in book 2? It's still Socrates. It's always Socrates, but then Socrates is in discussion with whom afterwards? Very good. Glaucon. And to a lesser extent, Adimantus. You remember who these people are? Plato's brothers. These are friends. They've invited them into their house, but at least philosophically speaking, they're hostile in the sense that they don't share Plato's views. They have very different views. They have democratic views, for example, when it comes to politics. These are conversational partners who share Socrates' views. These are the aristocrats from the upper city. And so in book 2 through book 4, we have a very different kind of conversation than what we had in book 1. Book 1 was this debate, dialectic, a conversation pursuing the truth, but it was a back and forth between people with opposing views. Here, it's Socrates in conversation with Adimantus, but it's more sympathetic. Glaucon says at the beginning, first of all, I want to see you really refute Thrasymachus, not just seem to refute him. And secondly, Glaucon says, I agree with you about justice. I want to be shown why what you're saying is true. I want the explanation. I don't need the proof, I want the explanation. So Socrates says, after this challenge, which we won't repeat, Socrates says, okay, I'm going to have to begin in a very different way. I'm not going to be able to engage in a dialectic that will presume things. I'm going to have to begin from the beginning. And his general strategy is what? just so that you could see what frames all of that. What's his general strategy?
Dialogue.
Well, it's a dialogue, yes, but it's more Socrates developing a long theory about what? I'll give you a hint. The justice that they were talking about here was individual justice. The justice of someone returning a sword, the justice of someone helping a friend, the justice of someone becoming rich. What's the justice they're talking about here?
Justice in nation.
Yes, exactly. Political justice. In order to see justice in the city, he has to build a city. And I'll just remind you of the principle of specialization. Each person in this city has a task and should do his own task. It was determined that that's what will be best for the city, and then they developed the whole city out of that. And then books 2 through 4 are this elaborate development of a perfect city, a utopia. We won't repeat any of that unless you have specific questions. But what was the purpose of developing political justice? It wasn't for its own sake. He's not immediately interested in political justice. So why bother?
To find the justice in our spirits, how to say it?
In our soul.
So, yeah.
That's right. The idea was, look at justice in the giant city, and then see a pattern, and then look back to the soul, which no one had studied before. There was no psychology at this point. Plato's inventing the discipline of psychology. There isn't a terminology, there aren't distinctions, and so on. So he's saying, we do have a vocabulary and eyes for the big city. Let's take what we learned from that and then apply it to the individual. So where we were at the end of last class was we finally got a definition of justice. For the city. Does anyone remember what it was? We, with him, divided the city into 3, and I'll do it more proportionally. It's really a big bottom class, and then a middle class, and then a very small upper class. What were those classes?
Philosopher.
So, these are called the guardians.
Oh yeah.
You're not wrong, that'll come up later. And what is their virtue?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. And what is wisdom? I could have asked, what is their task? What is their job? And then their virtue will just be doing that task well. Just like, what is the task of this? Holding water. What is it to be a virtuous jug? Holding water well. What is the guardian's task in the city? What are they there for?
Knowing,
Right.
knowing what's best.
That's right.
Yeah.
Knowing what's best. Knowing what's best for domesticated animals? No. Knowing what's best for themselves? No. Knowing what's best for what?
Nation.
Exactly. For the whole. They are unique in that they see the whole city and they think about what's best for the whole city. They alone have that overall view. All right, then we have a second class. In English, they're called the auxiliaries. It's from the Latin, it just means helpers. These were guardians in training who didn't make the cut. So they have many of the same virtues, but they don't, in the end, have wisdom. What is their task?
Courage.
Yeah, so that's their virtue. Their task would be, I've already encoded here, helping the guardians in times of threat. So courage turns out to be preserving what the guardians say to be terrifying. And that just takes a little bit of explanation because it's not clear. If an auxiliary is on the battlefield it will be, if it were you or me, terrifying that the enemy is coming at me. Let's say an entire battalion is coming at me and I'm standing alone. I would be terrified because I would be afraid of what?
This.
Death. But remember, what have the guardians been trained when it comes to death? The literature, the whole reason the education filtered out, there was a lot going on there, but one aspect of the education was training the guardians with a certain attitude to death. What was that attitude?
To this.
Yes.
Mm.
I'll remind you, there are passages in Homer, which is the literature that was used to train children and that Plato has to adopt because it's sort of like the equivalent of the Bible. This is what they're going to read. But in Homer, Achilles gets upset when his friend Patroclus dies. Or Priam, the father of Troy, loses all 50 sons, and he rolls in the dirt because he's grieving. Plato wants to cut that out. Why does he want to cut that out? He does not want the children, the future auxiliaries, the future guardians, he doesn't want them to read that. Why not?
It's a bad effect on.
It has a bad effect. And what's the bad effect? And don't be afraid to say the obvious. Sometimes I ask questions and I fear they're too obvious. No one thinks it needs to be said.
They're gonna imitate.
And what belief will they acquire if they imitate Priam rolling in the dirt? Or if they just merely imagine a good man, Priam, rolling in the dirt because he's lost 50 sons? What belief do they implicitly assume into their mind, into their lives? That death is a bad thing. Plato thinks death is not a bad thing. And if you train your future guardians to believe that death is not a bad thing, then when they're in battle, if I'm in battle and the battalion is coming at me, I won't be afraid of it any longer. I will preserve what the guardians have instructed me to believe is terrifying. They've instructed me to believe that death is not terrifying. Instead, what's terrifying is dishonor. Any questions about those first two classes? If not, then we have, these people are called the producers. We've been calling them the craftsmen, that's fine. There are some people in here, as you noticed, who are not craftsmen, like the merchants and the retailers. So they're the producers. This is the economic life of the city. And what is their task, or what is their virtue? Yep. Temperance, yes. So that's the virtue. Temperance. Self-control is really a better translation. And I'll just remind you of something I said earlier last week. These people have self-control as well. So do these. It's not that these people alone have self-control. It's rather that these people have self-control as something special because they don't have these things. So every virtue below is possessed by those above. But those possessed below possess only what they possess. Okay, so what is self-control in this political context when it comes to political justice? I'll remind you of the example I gave. The farmers are farming tobacco and they're making a lot of money out of that. But the guardians who are thinking about what's best for the whole, they're not thinking about what's best for the farmers, who are tobacco farmers. They're thinking about what's best for the whole city. And they realize, let's say, after learning, oh, tobacco causes lung cancer, so we're going to make you stop doing that because we're thinking about the health of the whole city. What will the tobacco farmers do? Will they have a riot? Will they have a rebellion? Say, no, we have rights to grow whatever we want to grow. This is a capitalist economy. We have right of private property.
No,
No, they won't say that. What will they do?
just follow the order.
To follow the order. So, there's a longer way of putting this, but I recommend just a shorter way. It's obedience to the guardians. They just drop farming tobacco and they start farming wheat. And of course, they miss the money that they used to make, but they believe so firmly that these people have their best interests at heart that they think, in the long run, it's probably better. We may not even know why, but it's best. Okay? So what's justice? Which is the whole goal of this whole conversation. I'm getting right up to where we were last time.
Stick to your job.
Yes! Do your task. Exactly. So when the producers are doing their task, which is ultimately being obedient to the guardians, and the auxiliaries are doing their task, which is preserving what should be scary in times of difficulty, and the guardians are doing their task, which is knowing what's whole, then the whole city is just. Justice is this super virtue, meta virtue. Stands above all the rest. So there's the answer to the question, what is justice? And why is it valuable? Well, why is it valuable? You're going to have a great city because these people are going to know what's best. These people are going to make sure that it's never lost, even in battlefield, and these people are going to obey that. However, the problem has not yet been solved because this was never about political justice. It was about individual justice. So what has to be done is it has to be applied to the individual. And you might remember, Hiroka, I wrote the big letters, Mikra. And I said, what does this say? And you could kind of see it said, here's the big. Now look at an individual. Can you see this in an individual? Well, that's what happens in the next few pages of the Republic, where an individual is said to have three classes within himself, three elements. And each one has the same task as the classes of the city, and thus each person has these four virtues in roughly the same arrangement, and so on. And if I had time, we would go through that. But I'm not going to bother, because at the end of it, Socrates says this really isn't a very good argument, because it's just an argument by analogy. It's saying, here we built up very carefully justice in the city, let's see if we can see it in the soul. And this just sort of says, like, take this pattern and put it in the soul. So he does it again, and that's where I'm going to start today. He does it again from the ground up, in the same way that this was from the ground up, for the individual. It's not going to take 3 books. It's only going to take 10 pages in the text, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip right to that. And we're going to build up his psychology from the ground, from basics. Okay, so that's where we were. That's what we're about to do. Any questions about anything? I should have said any questions from last week, or any questions about the method.
これから何を話すという最後に
最後、
今日はどういうことですか。
今日は何をする。今日は、今までここまで、今日までの復習をしてきて、国の中での3つの様子をっていうのを見てきたんですけども、それが一人の個人の魂の中でどのように現れているのかっていうところをこれから見ていきます。
ちょっと色が薄いので、ちょっと新しいの取ってくるわ。
はい。待っといた方がいいですか。
またな。
まだなくて。
None of them work very well. They all wear out after. It starts fine. It's the same problem in America. I buy my own. I bring my own every day. It's a good way. Yeah. Okay, well, why don't I start from the ground up then? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the soul. I guess I'll erase this. Hopefully it's in your mind by now. We're going to find the soul has the same structure and the same virtues, but we're not going to presuppose that it does. We're going to start from the beginning. Okay. Well, the first move to make in understanding Plato's psychology is the one that most scholars overlook, and then everything goes wrong after this. The soul, for Plato, is desire. If you don't see this, and I'm saying serious scholars of Plato in America don't see this, and as a result, everything gets messed up after that. They can have very clever accounts and so on, become very powerful, influential, in politics even. I assume he's Japanese American. I think he's born in America. Fukuyama. Are you familiar with this person? No. Yes, very influential in United States politics. He wrote a book in the 90s. He's written several books since then. And one of the major components of his book was a use of Plato's psychology for politics. In a way that, if you remind me, after we've done it, I'll tell you what he did. It's based on this mistake. He never sees this. And as a result, he misunderstands Plato's psychology. And, you know, I'll show you later, if we have time, how disastrous that is. So, if you can keep this in your mind, you're halfway there to understanding Plato. So, this does not have a soul. Why not?
Because it's not human.
No? Because we don't have any trees on this campus, at least they're not. Oh, I see a weed growing over there. There's a tree kind of there. There's one. Why do those have souls? For Plato.
Because they're alive.
So the soul is the life-giving principle. Soul equals life. You're absolutely right about that. We even have in English, anima is the Latin, and animate in English is alive. So the two things are just connected conceptually. So you're absolutely right. The tree is alive. The birds are alive. They have souls, fine. But now I'm asking you to make the Platonic move. What is it that shows that they have souls? Why are they alive? Or what, I should say more precisely, what is their life? What is their soul?
To live.
Well, that's just circling words around. They have something that this doesn't have. And again, you could say, they're alive, it's not, but I'm saying, what is that life that they have that this does not have? And I've given you the answer already. It's on the board. It's the thing that the professors don't see, and you see now that it's not obvious because it's an unusual way of thinking. What makes those things alive? Desire. Desire. The tree, the weed, is ensouled or alive because it wants something. It wants sunlight. It wants nutrients. The birds, likewise. Me or you, likewise. This, no. This has no soul. This is not alive. And in Plato's way, it's going to become helpful to understand what he's going to do about the soul. It doesn't want anything. It's not desiring anything. So the plant grows towards the sun. This falls to the earth. What's the difference? They both move. Well, the plant has a goal. It wants to be close. There's something about what it is that longs for the sunlight. There's no longing here. So take that for what it's worth. That's what he believes. And I'm just trying to illustrate the power of this equation. Yeah, please.
このデザイア、日本語で今の話と重ねると何とする？普通僕らデザイアって聞くと欲望とかなんか考えるよね。だけど違うね。
そうですね。 私なんかいい子願望って書きましたけど、たまたまでもちょっとそれが合ってるかどうかはわからない。
なんか
We are talking about Japanese translation of the
Okay, well, let me help you
desire
because
better.
in English, love will also be a good, same thing.
最初の週に
Longing, eros. That's a Greek word. That's not an English word, but erotic is an English word.
うん
Will? Maybe no.
So will and desire are sometimes used. I suppose. Yeah, I suppose. I don't know why I'm hesitating.
Yeah, something different.
Yeah. One reason I'm hesitating is a historical reason, that there's a problem of willpower and weakness of will that St. Paul and the Christians really introduce, at least in the West, where Paul has the idea of the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak. In other words, I want to follow God, but my will pulls me away. And that introduces all kinds of other assumptions. But for now, that would be fine.
Drive?
Drive, excellent, yes, drive. Yes, very, very important. Yes, that's at least in English, that's a Freudian notion. And Plato and Freud are in complete agreement here. I mean, Freud doesn't have a view about the birds and the trees, but when it comes to what is it to be a human being, it's to have a certain drive, a certain desire, a certain love. Plato and Freud have very different ideas about what that love's about, but they are the same in that they see the human being as fundamentally longing. Lots of other philosophers, I'm sure in Japan and the East as well, but in the West, most philosophers don't see the human being this way. Kant, for example, it's all about reason and thinking. What makes the human being is reason or language or other intellectual abilities and not desire. And this is why I think so many professors miss this thing about Plato, because they're trained in this tradition, this intellectual tradition, where people are alienated from their desires, alienated from their bodies, as if they're not that important to what's valuable in life and so on.
すごく変だけど、日本語で身体性って言葉は今の近い。だからソウルは身体性だと。すごく変だけど。
うん身体性
何の歌もいい。
このなんか欲求って意味でのなんか身体のってことですか。Yeah, so he talks about like a body, you know.
Yes.
It's like a kind of Japanese traditions like prioritizing like humans' bodies, like movements or
Yes.
like
Yes.
martial arts.
Yes.
Let's say like
Yes.
judo or stuff like that.
Yes.
It's like we kind of prioritizing the body.
Yes. Yes.
It's kind of he mentioned that's like he touched on that's like kind of similarity between bodiness. I'm not sure if it's correct word, but bodiness and soul.
Yes. Embodiment. You would say.
Embodiments, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Very much so. So it's one. I did martial arts for several years, and it's one of the attractions to me, because in the West, and I think for a lot of Americans, in the West, the educational tradition doesn't involve the body. But if you look at Plato, remember when we started building the city, we started the education, and what was the first thing? Music, but music in the sense of culture, always combined with what? And I didn't emphasize it because he doesn't talk about it very much, but it's there and it's very important. Music plus gymnastics. Because he thinks that if you don't have both, you're going to get a distorted soul. You're going to get a soul, if you have all music and no gymnastics, a soul that's too soft. And if you have all gymnastics and no music, a soul that's too hard. And I didn't mention a detail that's nonetheless important. The purpose for gymnastics, and maybe it's obvious, but the purpose for gymnastics in Plato is not to get fit, to look good, to be healthy. Those are nice things. He doesn't think those are bad things, but that's not the purpose. The purpose of gymnastics is to train the soul. And so, professors of philosophy in America, in the West, are no different from professors of sociology or physics or whatever. There's zero physical training. It's even silly, it's funny to even think. So you can become a Nobel Prize in all those disciplines and be completely out of shape. They're just different things. It's like the intellect has been separated and then it's got its own life. And then the body's over here. And yeah, sure, you can be a Nobel Prize in physics and go to the gym because you want to look good, you want to be fit, and so on. Not because it's going to make you a better physicist. Plato's built in from the beginning. It's going to make you a better philosopher to be in good shape. Okay, so we keep that in our mind. Now let's do an exercise. Tell me what people want. Just from each person, tell you what, just you pause for 2 or 3 minutes by yourself. You can write it down if you like. Think of 3 things that people want. It could be anything. It could be potato chips. It could be a trip to Okinawa, whatever. Just 3 things that people want.
今質問3つの
はい、3つのもの、
人が求めてる
人間が求めてる、
3つの
はい。
ちょっと言ってください
Sleep. Okay, so we're ready to go? All right, sleep. What are your 2 others? You're too sleepy. I'll give you a moment. So, do you have 1 or 2 or 3 ready to go?
Yeah, eating.
Okay, food?
Food. Partner.
Okay, meaning,
Hmm?
do you mean sex?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Could be.
You might mean more than that.
Like love.
Love, okay. Okay, so let's count that as 3 for now.
Cat,
Pardon me?
cat,
I don't understand.
cat, echo.
Kids?
Cat.
Oh, you want a cat? Oh, interesting. I never thought about that before. But you're right, many people do want a cat. Anything, what else? Dog.
Sea,
The sea. Oh, wow. Wow. Okay, I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with that. Now, and then one other.
music,
Music. Okay, very good. Do you remember, do you have 2 others now? I can give you more time.
Money.
Money, okay.
Very important.
Power.
Power, okay.
Eternity.
Eternity, okay. And I assume that means eternal life.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Peace.
Peace. After that, nothing?
Enough.
That's enough, okay. I'm not, and remember, I'm not asking you for what you want, although you can tell me what you want if you want. I'm not saying what do you want, I'm just saying what do humans want. And it doesn't have to be a grand category like money or food. It can be just, like I said, like a sip from this particular water. Or right now I want to go and I want to scratch my back. Anything.
Oh.
Well, Yoshi didn't answer for some reason.
あとですか
Later. Music. Somebody gave us music.
Sleep
Sleep. Somebody gave us sleep.
and walking in the woods.
Okay. Yoko?
私一つなん
あ、
だカントリーライフ
Country life?
Country life.
田舎暮らしっていうんですか
Ah.
Friends.
Friends.
River. Books.
Okay. Okay, I have a few pieces to pick up. Two more. Okay, it's okay. I won't put any more pressure. No pressure. Okay. Well, this list could go on forever and ever, as I said, especially if you lose it up and just think like anything any human has ever wanted. It's an infinite list. But we have, I think, a sense of the kinds of things humans want already. And what I'm going to try and do is show you what Plato does with this list. So I could start his psychology from the beginning. I could start with, here is the premise, let's build it up, and so on. And we can go back and do that. But I just found as a teacher it's better to start at the end and say, this is where it's going. What he wants to say is that there are types of desire. So it's not just the soul is desire. It's not just that birds desire and humans desire. But at least when it comes to human beings, which is the interest of this dialogue, there are types of things that humans desire. Now again, if every desire counts as a different type, there'd be an infinite number of types. But he thinks you can categorize them. And I've given you 3, and I've put things here where it's not clear where they would go, and we can think about where they would go. Let's talk about this category, which is the easiest to understand. These things, so I don't think we want a piece there. These are the 4 things that were said that are very clearly in category 1. Sleep, food. Again, can you think of other desires like that? Such as?
Drink.
Good.
Oxygen.
Very good. Oh, that's excellent. I'll help you. What happens if you don't have any oxygen?
Die.
You die. What happens if you don't get sleep for a week? You die. If you don't eat for, I don't know what the time is for a year, whatever. You die. If you don't have water for a week, you die. I'm looking for a list of things that are necessary for survival. There are only a few more things on that list, and we don't have to be tedious and complete it, as long as you get the sense, but I can fill it in for you. There's no good word in English. Maybe there'll be one in Japanese that will help. If you're too cold, you die. If you're too hot, you die. There's a range of temperature in which human beings can survive, and we work very hard to make sure we stay in that range. So if it gets too cold outside, we put on clothes, or if we don't have clothes, we quickly make them and put them on. If it's too hot, we find a river and jump in the river. The one other that I can think on this list that, interestingly, no one ever brings up is if you have to pee. That's a very strong desire. And you'll die if you can't fulfill that desire. The same thing with pooping. Regular desires of your body that if you don't satisfy, you'll die. Okay. So, survival. Do you need to have sex to survive as an individual? No. No, monks go without sex and they do just fine as far as survival is concerned. So this category 1 can't be about survival. Sex is necessary for reproduction, or at least has been until very recently, with technology. And if there's a category 1, there has to be some link between survival and reproduction that includes those in the same thing. Now, I'm not pretending that Plato foresaw the solution to this problem, but he certainly saw that there was a connection there, and he left it. It was enough for his purposes that there's this connection. Does anyone see what the connection is? Scientifically speaking, you need something that happened in the 19th century to see the connection.
Sorry, connection with what?
Okay, I'll back up.
Yeah.
If all we ever got from category 1 was those things, then I could say category 1 is about bodily survival. And maybe you want to say that, but wait a second, there's also sex. And one thing that I should have said about all these things is that we call them appetites, at least in English. So I have hunger for food. I have a strong appetite or desire to go to sleep. I'm just so tired. I really, really, really gotta go. And so on. The body, when it doesn't get these things, it pushes and pushes and pushes until it gets them. In that respect, sex is like those things. So lust is the appetite, just as hunger is the appetite, or fatigue is the appetite, or thirst. I'm sorry, it's such a mess at this point, but these are all appetites, which is to say, the body presses hard to get what it wants. The body doesn't press hard for these other things. When you want music, it's not like your body is saying, give me music or I'm gonna die. That's not to say music's not important, and for some people it's not an existential matter and so on, but I think there's a very clear sense in which we all have bodies that do these things and push for them, otherwise we feel like we're gonna die, and that's not the case for these things. And so now what I'm asking is, what unites the human appetites? Why do we have these appetites? I'll give you a hint. What if your parents had no lust?
We're not gonna be here.
You wouldn't be here. What if your parents had no fatigue? They just never felt tired. I'll make it easier. What if your parents had no hunger? No matter what was going on in their stomach, they never felt hunger.
They're gonna die.
They're gonna die. Have you ever heard of this condition? I don't know the name of it. People who don't feel pain. It's a fatal condition. We all think, oh, I wish I didn't have to suffer pain. But unless you suffer pain, you're not motivated to get out of the condition that's causing you pain. And so people who don't feel pain die prematurely because they don't have that very powerful warning signal to stop doing whatever it is that's causing the pain. So similarly, if your parents didn't feel desperate need to breathe when their mouth was being closed, they would have died. And if they died, they wouldn't have had you. So too for all of these appetites. In other words, these are all appetites that you have to have in order to be alive. This is an appetite that your parents, in addition to having all these as well, had to have for you to be alive. And we are all the offspring of parents, who are all the offspring of parents before them and parents before them. And the name I was hinting at in the 19th century is Charles Darwin. He gave us a theory that biologists still work with as the basic assumption of that field, biology. Theory of natural selection. That organisms that are suited to their environment and reproductive, their genes will get to the next generation. And organisms that are not suited to their environment and are not reproductive, their genes don't get to the next generation. And so here we are, this group of us. We all have our respective genetic codes, but each one of our genetic codes has a code for these things, simply because our ancestors had these codes. There may have been human beings, I'm sure there were, that didn't have some of these things. But we're not the descendants of those people, because they didn't survive and they didn't reproduce. Now, that's not in Plato, excuse me. That's not in Plato. I'm just filling in for Plato, because Plato has this, something like this list, and he has this, but it's not clear how they fit together. Now we understand how they fit together. It's just a matter of having a body. If bodies are the result of natural selection, they gotta have these things. And so here we are. We're the results of natural selection, so we've got these things. What he does do to unite all of these is emphasize money. Without highlighting it, he definitely notices a very interesting fact about these things. You can buy them. There has to be supply, there has to be a market, there has to be a currency. But given those things, you can buy clothing, you can buy time or a bed, you can buy food, you can buy drink, you can buy sex. You don't have to buy those things, but money can buy those things. Can money, Professor Tadashi, can money buy you peace? No. Can money buy you power? Let's do something. Can money buy you talented flute playing? No. You can buy the fanciest flute instructor in the world, you can buy the best flute, you can buy the time that you would need to become a good flute player, but you can't buy the flute playing. Now, can you buy a river? I suppose. Can you buy country life? Can you buy the sea? I assume you meant going to the sea? Walking in the woods? I'm putting this as a question, I'm not asserting. Does that mean these things belong over here? Because whatever the Darwinian story I told you, we can focus now on the Platonic story. The Platonic story is that this first desire is money love. The desire for money. Because the soul, which wants these things, recognizes at a certain point, hey, if I devote myself to making money, I can have these things reliably. I can have a lot of them. I can have all of them. I get really, really rich. And so what characterizes this first type of desire is the love of money. So I'll put it to you again, without presupposing the answer. Do these things belong over here? I wouldn't think so. Is your desire for a river money love? Is your desire to go to the sea money love? Yoshi Sensei, is your desire for country life money love? I want to hear what you all have to say, but I assume when people say these things that they're equating them with that. That what they want is peace, and these are the places you go to find that. Is that correct? And if you can't buy peace, then you can't buy these. You can buy a river, and you can buy the time and the transportation to go to the river, but that's not going to give you the peace. That would be like buying a fancy flute and buying a fancy flute instructor. That's not going to make you a flute player. So any thoughts about those or about this category? I'll move on to the second. Unless there are questions.
So you mean we can buy those things with money?
Yes. I mean, where were we when, I know we were out at lunch one day when someone said about buying breathing, buying oxygen. And I made a joke and I thought, we're gonna get to that. Anyway, we're not at the point where you have to buy that yet, but you can see it. 50 years maybe? Polluted cities, and come into our chamber and get a fresh breath for 5 minutes. Tokyo will do it first, I'm sure.
And then without money, we cannot survive.
Well, I wouldn't go that far because there are societies that don't have money. And then sometimes these things are not for sale. Like let's say there's a strict prostitution law, for example. This just simply can't be bought. So these things can be acquired without money. The claim is not that you need money to have these things. The claim is that if you have money, in the right circumstances, you can buy these things.
If you have money, you can buy.
Yes. And that's where the money love comes from, is the soul says, I want this, this, and this. I really want some money so that I can get a good sleep every night. Because I'm having to work 2 jobs, and I can only sleep 5 hours a night, and it's really starting to add up.
So like desire to have money is going down to those, kind of desires.
Yes. Yes.
Mm.
If we've gotten a good description, I mean, I only asked everybody to give me 3. If we had a bigger list, we might have trouble. Like the cat. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with the cat. We'll see.
But maybe it's off topic, but we have like subscription innovation these days, and then like people are like paying money to join the, let's say, Conference Society of Education Pedagogy or Society of
Okay.
Philosophy, or
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe also subscription to ChatGPT or stuff like that.
Yeah.
I feel like this could be down to the knowledge with money.
Oh, yeah. It's not every time you spend money or that you earn money. It's because you want these things.
Mhm.
That's not the claim. Because money can help acquire these 2 other things.
Mhm.
But the difference is subtle. It's that you can't buy these things. So take ChatGPT. Let's say you subscribe to a special version of ChatGPT because it gives you the most reliable results. And the reason you paid for that rather than the free one is you want knowledge, you want truth.
Mhm.
The money that you're putting into that service can't buy you the knowledge. It can buy you the tools that can help you acquire the knowledge, but it can't buy the knowledge itself. Just like it can buy you the fanciest flute instructor in the world, and it can buy you the fanciest flute, and it can put them in front of you, but it can't give you the flute playing. The ChatGPT thing is very clever, and I don't want you to drop it. You can keep it in reserve or come back with it. It's that it seems like we can buy knowledge when we can, buy an encyclopedia or buy a survey like that. And that's an illusion because that's not actually knowledge. And then well, why not? Oh, I haven't told you what I think knowledge is. I haven't told you what Plato thinks. But when you see what Plato thinks knowledge is, if you agree with them, then that's not knowledge. I hope we come back to that because that's a very deep point. So maybe in the interest of getting there, let's do 2. People didn't give me a lot of examples in here. But, I'll fill in things that people sometimes say. Family. Good coworkers. Community. Do you see where it's going? Again, I haven't done the cat yet. But aside from the cat, do you see a pattern?
Like connection
With
someone.
With people. There's something about the social that people want. Take friends. Do you want any random person to be your friend?
No.
Like, let's say you have enough time in your life for 10 friends. Do you want me to just pick them out of the subway randomly and give them to you? No. What kind of friends do you want? I'll make it simple. Do you want bad friends or good friends? You want good friends. And the reason I'm not being cheap, it's, what is a good friend? That would take us a long discussion, but I'm trying to just speed things up a little to say that the reason we don't want just any random person to be our friend is we think there are good people and bad people, and I want to be friends with the good people. However we understand that. Okay, so it's not all friends, just good friends. It's not all people, it's just good. And let's say I've got 10 people that you would think are good. This is crazy, of course. And I give them to you. All right, these are your friends. Do you want them to think you're good, or do you want them to think you're bad?
Good.
You want them to think you're good. And in this silly example I'm using, we could do real-life versions. Maybe it would be worth it in a minute. All I'm trying to highlight is that when we want friends, we want to be friends with a certain kind of person that we think to be good, and we want them to think that we're also a good person. There's value in that interaction, whether we recognize it or not. And by value, I mean there's a discrimination within the mind of each of us that we're choosing this person because of some value that they have. And what I'm trying to get at with that is that friendship is involved with respect. That when I choose you as a friend, I'm giving you respect. I'm saying you're a person of a certain worth, and as a result, I won't treat you these certain ways. I'm going to treat you these ways. That are the way I treat somebody when I show them respect. And I expect you to treat me the same way. And I think this is also the case with family. We don't choose our family, but we expect a certain level of respect from our family, just as they expect a certain level of respect from us. And just as in friendship, but it would have to be much more so, the respect can be so violated that the relationship ends. People become estranged from their families. You're still the son of so-and-so or the mother of so-and-so, that never goes away. But you don't want to have anything to do with that person anymore because the respect that you think is essential for a relationship was violated. And so on for all the others. Again, we'll keep the cat in reserve for a moment. What I'm going fast here, but what I'm trying to bring us to is Plato's understanding of what this second of the three types of desire is for. It's for respect. And there are lots of synonyms for this: status, esteem. Honor is the word that you'll see, at least in the English translations. Take the difference between fame and honor. See, it wore out. They always wear out. That's the one you gave me. What is the Japanese? Fame versus honor. Maybe I'll talk about them and then you can tell me. By fame, I mean only that somebody is in the public spotlight. So we have people in America like this all the time. Everybody's talking about so-and-so. The example I've always used is Paris Hilton. She actually has a new album now, so out of nowhere. But there was one year, I don't remember when it was, and she just appeared out of nowhere. And everybody was talking about her. And I didn't know who she was, so I was asking, okay, well, what has she done? Like, why is... And nobody knew. Now, in other words, I think the correct answer was her dad owned the Hilton hotel chain, and then she used that money to promote herself. And then people started talking about her, and then people started talking about other people were talking about her, and so on. There was a chain reaction, and then she was famous. What I'm talking about here when I say fame versus honor is that there's nothing good involved. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm just saying that to become famous, you don't have to be good. You don't have to be anything. You don't have to be talented. It's simply that people are thinking about you. Whereas honor is fame plus people think you're good. In other words, they're thinking about you because they think you're good. By the way, in Japan, who would be the example that people reach for? We have cliches in America. If we want to think of an honorable person, we say George Washington. I'm just wondering in Japan, which person, like, who are the 2 or 3 people?
Honor.
Yes.
Honor. Shohei Ohtani.
Oh, yeah. It's a good choice, yeah.
People agree with that, maybe? Yeah.
Very good at what he does.
Like, mostly sports player, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
People gonna agree. Like,
Okay.
Instead of politician or academic person or
Mhm.
entertainment, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, well. As long as you get the distinction that I'm talking about between fame and honor. The reason I did that is because honor is part of this list of words that are denoting something that this love is about. It's about wanting to be thought well of by people. I want to be respected. I want to be honored. I want to be accorded status by people. I want to walk in the room and have people say hello instead of ignore me. mean to be speaking about myself there, but merely to say, this is what we want. Now, when it comes to pets, so I'm a dog lover too, and I think that this is related to this. I think we want a community with an animal. And it's important to us that the dog think well of us. I mean, I don't know cat love, so you have to tell me. But one great thing about dogs is they give you this right off the bat. You don't even have to earn it. So, you know, one of our politicians, a president from 20 years ago, said, I went to Washington and I got a dog. Because that way, no matter how much criticism I got during the day, I would always get respect at night when I went home. Did you want to say more about cat love?
Cats don't give me anything but healing.
Hating. Yeah, that's why I never understand cat love. Why do people, what do people get out of having a cat?
He says she's being healed.
Pardon me?
The healing, healed.
They heal you.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Oh, healed.
Yes.
Oh, I misunderstood.
I think.
Okay. How does the cat heal you? I'll say that that's, I wouldn't have used those terms, but those agree with what I was saying earlier, which is I feel healed by my dog at the end of the day. If I have a hard day, I go home, my dog is wagging his tail and jumps all over me, I feel healed in the sense of, I feel like, this is the way it should be. This is the respect I should be getting from everybody. I don't know if it's the same for you with a cat.
Cats don't need to do anything.
They don't need to do anything. And that's healing to you.
Yes.
How so? Can I fill in a thought? Again, I don't want to push my thoughts into your thoughts, but I think a bit about what you're saying. I think, yeah, I agree to that. That I get to create a world for my dog that I wish I had. In other words, a life of relaxation, a life of satisfaction, playing, innocence, and so on. And I wish I had that life. I'm too old. I'm a human being, but I like to fantasize about having that life. And the dog allows me to be close to that. In America, we have this assumption, people look like their pets. People look like their dogs, especially. Not here. And it's interesting because it's uncanny sometimes, and you wonder, did the dog start looking like the master, or did the master start looking like the dog? I think it's both. It's like they're in this mutual world of fantasy satisfaction. Of the dog is going to play the role that the master wants, and then the master is going to kind of envy the dog and be more like the dog, and so on. Not at all, this has nothing to do with. Okay.
Cat is cat.
Cat is cat.
Yes, it's cat.
I don't know if it's the right word for her, but to me, the cat, it's like, it's just presence.
Yes,
Just being there.
yes, yes.
Mm.
Yes,
Doesn't have to do anything.
the indifference, the fact that they're so indifferent to you is appealing to you.
I want to give my cat the thinking of human being.
The what?
And
日本語でどうぞ。
猫に人の考えに与えない。例えばその猫は人に似ているとか、猫は猫、人間は人間、違う世界です。
Well, for her, cat is a cat. Cat has its own world.
Yes.
So, I mean, so she doesn't think a cat as a human. So she
Yes.
doesn't humanize
Right.
the cat.
Yes.
So it is a cat.
Yes.
That's what she says.
Yes. Yes. So I think we just kind of have to leave that. And I was trying to assimilate it. I think a dog can be assimilated, but I think a cat can't be assimilated. And the question is, the cat sounds more like the flower at the beginning of your book, of let the flower be, don't pluck it. And we'll move on, keeping this in mind. Are there any questions about what category 2 is?
Yeah, and the second part is kind of questionable for me still.
Okay.
Yeah. Like she talks a little bit about it, because like we don't want to have the like you wanna look like a good person, like from the other's perspective, such as friends or family.
Yeah.
But like she says, at some point we need just a presence, such as cats.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they, I don't know, maybe they don't like us. They don't like the owner. Vice versa. So what I want to
What was that last
vice
one?
versa.
Vice versa.
Yeah. So what I want to say is that sometimes we want to just a presence in front of us,
Mm-hmm.
such as cats or humans. We want to, if that's the case, in that sense, we don't want to be, looking like the, honor person, like a good person. Vice versa as well. We don't want to be looking like the bad person from their
Yes.
perspective as well.
Yes.
We want to be just a presence in that space,
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
If you look at other birds in the space you're belonging to right now, there is someone. That's good maybe. That is also kind of like the sense of belonging or desire to belonging to somewhere. That's what I was thinking about us. If that makes sense.
I was with you until that part.
Yeah.
Can I summarize what I've understood
Yeah.
in what you're saying? That you think there is something going on here, and that my effort on Plato's behalf to say what is going on here is people wanting to be connected with other people with mutual respect. And you're saying, presumably you're saying, yes, people often want that, but sometimes they want to be connected with people in a way where there's no judgment. It's simply, we're in the presence of each other. And this is what the cat relationship perhaps is getting at.
Yeah. But like maybe if that's the case, we are respecting each other.
That's
like,
what-
like
that's-
cat and
Yeah.
cat and human, cat and owner. Maybe
Yes.
both are respecting. Maybe they're not really into each other, but they respecting each other maybe. In that sense, maybe.
Now, I think that's how Plato would reply.
Yes, maybe.
Yes.
So. Okay.
I mean, take sexual love, which under this category was called lust. Sexual love can appear here too. It could be the same activity with a different character. Here the character would be simply satisfying the bodily urge. Here the character would be engaging in some kind of mutually respectful call it. Okay? Let's go to category 3, not presuming that we've solved all the mysteries of human psychology, but just in the interests of getting the whole picture out. Let me work with the book. I think it was Yoko, you said a book, something that you want. And what is it that you want when you, because presumably I could give you, there's a book in America right now, not this one, we're grabbing a book. There's a book in America right now called The Accomplishments of Kamala Harris. She's running for president, and it's about that long, and it's all blank pages. Presumably that's not a book you want, because there's nothing in there. So it's not actually the book that you want. The book is a vehicle for what you want. What is it? What's it a vehicle for? What's in the book that you want?
Just, well, there's lots of things. For example, it just let me live in another world, another
Okay.
life. Or
Okay.
it could give me some different kinds of knowledge.
Okay.
Or some stimulation.
Okay. When you say stimulation, can I say entertainment?
Yeah.
So that's the answer I was looking for, but you've raised 2 others that are very interesting. Let me handle the answer I was expecting, and then we can get to those. All right, so knowledge. Let's focus now on the desire for knowledge. We've already spoken about it a bit. Think about the craft of flute playing. We've talked about how you can buy a flute, you can buy a teacher, you can be in a community of other flute players. You can you can put yourself in a situation where you're surrounded by the craft of flute playing, but you don't have the craft of flute playing. This is what I also said when you talked about ChatGPT. That's like surrounding yourself with knowledge, but not actually having the knowledge. And it's very easy to confuse. I'm surrounded with knowledge versus I know. So I haven't said anything important yet. It's really a contrast to say, when you desire knowledge, where you really want the knowledge, not the appearance of the knowledge, you can't buy it, and you can't get it simply because people think you have it. Somebody, you could be paid as a doctor, you could be seen as a doctor, you could have a white coat, have the degrees, go into the hospital and have everyone bow to you and so on. That doesn't make you a doctor. What makes you a doctor is that you have the craft of medicine, the knowledge. We'll talk about these other things, but I really want to focus on that now and go back and show the contrast. And I'll give you the title of this. This is Wisdom Love, Honor Love, Money Love. What does it take to be rich? Let me make it easy. What does it take to be famous? We've already done that. Let's say I'm famous in America. Why am I famous? What makes me famous in America?
You have a bunch of followers in Instagram.
Yeah, that there are people who think about me in America. What if nobody in America ever thinks about me? Could I still be famous in America?
Is it possible?
That's my question.
I don't think it's possible.
It's not possible. I'm trying to take the simplest case, namely fame, where what it is to be famous is to be thought to be famous. So when it comes to fame, there's an appearance of fame. What about the reality of fame? What's the relationship when it comes to fame between appearance and reality? If I appear famous, am I famous? Am I really famous if I seem famous?
You seem famous.
I seem famous, and so I am famous. For fame, appearance and reality are the same thing. That's the easy one. Let's try wealth. Is the appearance of wealth the reality of wealth? Could I seem very rich, but not be rich?
Possible.
Seems so. Give me an example.
You have like, I don't know, polos, t-shirts, or
Mhm.
polos, pants, or jeans, and it's like fancier brand style, but you're not actually wealthy.
Yeah, I stole this fancy clothes and I walked in here, and it's absolutely right that in a small context I can seem wealthy but not in fact be wealthy. But let's broaden the context. Let's say I seem wealthy to you because I wear a tie, and then I go into the bank and I seem to them like I'm the guy who has that account that has the $1 million in it. And because they think I'm that guy, I'm allowed to make a withdrawal from that account. And then I go and spend that money and I do all the things that rich people do because I seemed so to the banker. We've done this before in book 1. Remember, is there a craft of money making?
No.
Thrasymachus said, effectively, there's a craft of money making, Socrates, and I'm good at it. It's the craft of public relations, it's the craft of getting power, and I, Thrasymachus, am good at it. Because I've shown that I go town to town and people give me money. So I get money, so therefore I'm good at this craft. Do you remember what Socrates' reply was?
I don't
No?
remember.
That's okay. He said, well, that's not like other crafts. Like if you're an expert at the craft of carpentry, there has to be some real thing that you know. Whereas in money making, you don't have to know anything. You just have to seem to people as if you know things. Same for public relations, same for getting power. So, I haven't proven this to you, we would need to talk about it a lot more, but wealth is like fame in the sense that if you seem wealthy, you are wealthy because there's no reality to wealth outside of how people think about you. Let me give you an example, and there's no way to convince people of this in a short amount of time. Although I think it's one of these things that intellectually the point is really straightforward, but it takes time to turn your soul away from a certain image. And the words are not going to turn the soul. The words can be there and they can help you think about your understanding as you turn your soul. But let me give you an example that might help. So I've used Donald Trump as an example in my teaching since I began teaching 25 years ago. Long before he was president, long before he was on TV. Nobody talked about him anymore. Because when I was growing up in the 80s, he was on TV a lot as a rich man. kind of playboy, New York, real estate agent, and so on. And the weird thing about those TV reports was they would talk about how he was a rich man and that he was bankrupt. And I couldn't understand, how can you be rich and bankrupt at the same time? Because bankrupt means you have no money, but rich means you have a lot of money. So which is it? He's rich or he's bankrupt? Well, he's both. How in the world can you be both? Well, if you're bankrupt, which is to say you have no money in your account, you can still be rich if you go to a bank and you say, you know, even though there's no money in my account, lend me 10 million. I will build a skyscraper and I'll give you back 15 million. He was able to do that over and over again. That's how he grew his wealth. Sometimes it wouldn't work. Sometimes he would fail to build the skyscraper and he would become bankrupt. So then he had to convince somebody else to give him money. And he, wound his way through bankruptcies and successes and so on, eventually obviously to become President of the United States, at least once. And he's just a perfect example of how wealth is nothing but how people think of you. He was wealthy the whole time because people treated him as wealthy. People lent him money, expecting they would get it back. Because he's wealthy, of course he's going to pay it back. We're going to break in a few minutes. I want you to see where this is going. What about health? Is the appearance of health the reality of health? So what about me? Do I seem healthy to you?
Yeah, finally, for the moment.
Finally. Certainly more than I was on Tuesday, let alone over the weekend. I seem healthy. What if in fact I've got a tumor that's about to rupture? Does the fact that I seem healthy to you make me healthy? No, there's a reality to my body in this scenario. I'm actually very sick. That's different, or at least can be different from how I seem. I could get everybody to believe that I'm healthy. That won't change the reality of my body. So there's a very clear case where the appearance of something doesn't equal the reality of it. They're different things. Let me give you another example. Knowledge. If I seem like I know, does that mean I know? If I seem like I know medicine, if I have a degree from Harvard Medical School, if I have a white coat, if other doctors bow to me when I walk into the surgery, does that make me knowledgeable in medicine?
Can I ask a question?
Well, let me first get the yes or no to
Yeah.
that.
No.
No. To seem knowledgeable in anything is not the same as being knowledgeable in that thing.
Yeah.
And so I'll take your question in a second, but here's our contrast. What makes wisdom different from honor, status, respect, esteem on the one hand, and money on the other? So there's a huge divide between this and everything else. Wisdom, special kind of knowledge. This is a love of knowledge, which is about reality. These things are appearances. In fact, these things, because they're things that we want, we call them, or I'm going to call them now, apparent goods. This is something that's really good. That's the fundamental divide in the human soul, according to Plato. We're desiring, which is to say we're alive. We desire different kinds of things. We spent, sufficient time for you to get a sense of the variety. But in the end, there are just two types of desire. There's desire for apparent goods, things whose goodness depends on how they seem to other people. And desire for what's really good. Things or some one thing whose goodness is good no matter what people think about it. And Plato thinks this thing in the human soul, this love of wisdom, which is just philosophy, that's a desire for the real good. Okay, so you had your question.
Yeah, sorry, we're talking about desire, so this is off topic, so
Okay.
I will think about it a bit more. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is your question, Professor Doshisha?
The meaning of real.
Real. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Who realize or who criticize, who judge?
Oh yeah, that's what I was asking.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I've been thinking about that.
Okay. So finding out what's really good is a separate and very interesting question. And we may decide no one can find out what that is. But that's different from this question, which is there a notion of something really good as opposed to everything else, which is apparently good? And the definition is pretty straightforward. It's that apparent goods, their existence depends on them seeming that way to people. And the existence of something really good, if there is such a thing, does not depend on what people think about it. So that's the distinction. Those are the categories. But it's definitely open to philosophers and anybody to say, there's no such thing. This is a phantasm. This is Plato's imagination. That's the fundamental question of Platonism. Plato stakes his ground right here and he says, there is such a thing. Because if there isn't, life is worthless. Life is just moving among shadows at the bottom of a cave, where all that matters is images on a wall. Now I can fulfill that promise at the beginning of today where I said, let's just skip where he applies the city to the soul and he just says, let's imagine. We built it up from the ground, and there is in every person, it seems, 3 parts of the soul, which is a fancy way of saying 3 types of desire. There's money love, there's honor love, and there's wisdom love. And the virtue of this is obviously wisdom. The virtue of this is courage. The virtue of this is self-control. And when each of these parts does its task, that's justice. I'm going very fast here, but just so that we don't lose our momentum, you miss the chance to see how it all comes back round. The answer to what is justice is, for the individual, just like for the city, justice is when each does his task. But that doesn't mean each individual in the city doing his task. It means each thing in you is doing its task. Your desire for money is able to control itself when your desire for what's really good says, don't do that anymore. So you have within yourself a desire for money, a desire for respect, and a desire for what's really good. And those are fine in their own domains. It's fine to love money. It's fine to love respect. And it's obviously fine to love what's really good. So long as your love of what's really good sets the course of your life, you are a just person. You live the best life because you're aiming towards what's really good. And nothing will pull you away from that course. But if your soul becomes unjust, disharmonious, discordant, then your love of money or your love of status can pull you away from what is in you saying, this is what's really best. And instead of doing what's really best, you do what will make you more money, or you do what will keep the affection of your friends and family. Again, that's another detail I had to leave out as we went to the end first, is that Plato thinks that these parts come into conflict, these desires come into conflict. In every situation, it's possible that you're going to have to decide, am I going to do A or B? A will get me more money. B will get me more respect. If you choose B, that shows you care more about respect than you do about money. Sometimes you'll have to choose between what's really good and what's honored. Because societies don't always get what's really good correct. And so sometimes to go for what's really good, you will have to go against the grain of your family and your friends and your community, and you will be despised, and you will perhaps be executed, like Socrates. And the reason you do it is because you love what's really good. And you wish they loved you, and you wish they could see the value in what you're doing, but they don't. And so you make the hard choice to prefer what's really good to taking their love. And that's the wise and the just person, namely Socrates.
You know, like, I totally understood the desire, our human's desire is divided into three parts.
Yeah.
From money love to wisdom love.
Yes.
And our soul is a desire. Okay, I understand. But
Yes.
Seems like there's all over beyond my understanding between the, like talking about why these three desires, separation, specialization
Yes.
of those desires are gonna be justice. I totally understood, desires are separated,
Yes.
could be separated
Yes.
in three parts.
Yes.
I totally understood, but why is it gonna be justice? I guess it's still kind of beyond my.
Okay. So you understand what he's defining justice is. I mean, I'm only saying so that I don't have to repeat it. Justice is when each of the desires does its own thing well.
If Plato says, yeah, I understood,
Yeah.
it is what it is. But
Okay, but why?
why? Yeah.
Okay. And is the question, why call that justice? Or?
Yeah.
Very good question. Do you remember book 1? When each one of those gave a definition of justice, and it was shown to be inadequate in some way? That's like saying to the blind man who's grabbed onto the leg of the elephant, you're wrong, that's not a tree, that's the leg of an elephant. Or the ear. That's not a carpet, that's an ear. That's not a tusk, that's not a sword, that's a tusk. That's the book 1. That's just saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, and so on. The sighted man in the parable, he sees not only why they're wrong, but why they had to make those mistakes. So now, we are the sighted ones when it comes to justice, if Plato's right. we see what justice is. It's when each part in the soul does its own task. So that injustice is when one or more parts is not doing its task. And that's not the full answer, I'm just taking you along the way. So there's one way to get it right, this way. And then there are many, many ways to get it wrong. Like this disobeys this. This disobeys this.
Yeah.
These together disobey that, and so on. Plato thinks there are 5 basic ways to get things wrong. And those are the types of injustice. And right at the end of book 4, he's about to tell us about the types of injustice. Then there's an interruption, and then that gets picked up again in book 8. Don't worry about that. The reason I'm bringing that up is to say there are types of injustice according to what has gone wrong in the soul. These are men for whom something has gone wrong in their soul. Well, they're just regular guys like you and me. In other words, they're not perfectly just. Something has gone wrong. And in this guy, what do you think his vice is? What do you think his version of injustice is? What do you think has gone wrong in his soul? He doesn't have a soul like this, where the money love is obeying the wisdom love. He's a businessman. He's devoted his life to this, as if this were the best life. And so when you ask him what justice is, he can't see what justice is. He can see what justice looks like to a money lover. So it's not only that he makes a mistake, it's not only, hey, Cephalus, you're grabbing a leg of an elephant, not a tree. It's that we can see the reason you think that's the leg of a tree is because you're a money lover. He is an honor lover. He's the courageous soldier who gives the soldier's understanding of what justice is. Benefit your friends and harm your enemies. Now, Thrasymachus is something altogether more complicated because his understanding is the advantage of the stronger. But what does he think makes you stronger? Is it winning in the wrestling match, remember? Is Justice giving 10 pounds of beef to Polydamas because he's the strongest man and so whatever's advantageous to him must be just? No, that's ridiculous. You're making fun of me, Socrates. It was a joke, but it was meant to make a serious point. Thrasymachus understands strength as political power. So someone who's obsessed with political power, which is what Thrasymachus is, he's given a definition of justice of somebody who wants power for power's sake. That's a total inversion of this. Because what is wisdom love? Well, wisdom. What is wisdom about? What's really good. Does Thrasymachus care about what's really good? No. He cares only about power. That's why his worldview is the complete opposite of Socrates' worldview.
It's messed up.
It's completely messed up, yeah. And it's clear now that in this course we're not going to make it this far, but in books 8 and then book 9, you get this psychology applied to circumstances, and you get to see how do people get messed up. And then what's the most messed up you can possibly get? It's to become like Thrasymachus, to have your soul kind of turned upside down in pursuing power. I'll say one more thing. Plato, Socrates are not against power. They're not against political power or power in the self. They're all for those things. But power should be exercised by wisdom. Because if power is exercised by wisdom, then it's done in the sake of what's really good. When it's not done with wisdom, it's done for what's apparently good. which is to say not what's really good. Things will go wrong. So that's why, again, for Plato, this is the fundamental distinction. Is there such a thing as wisdom? Is there such a thing as what's really good? Because if there isn't, you're just left with Thrasymachus. This whole dialogue is an effort to say, that guy was really, really smart, and he was really, really onto something, but he missed one important thing, and everything depends on this. That what's real is different from how things seem. There's something really good that's so good that if you have that, you don't need any of the other appearances. That's the force of Glaucon's challenge. Show me, Socrates, something so good that if I were to have that, I could be poor, I could be abandoned by everybody, and I would still have the best life.
So like from the perspective of someone who was talking with Socrates in this book,
Yes.
someone has a conception such as like triangle, and which has honor love on the top
Okay, yes, yes.
and money love on the bottom, and
Yes.
that's it might be.
That'd be Polemarchus.
Yeah,
Mhm.
kind of like that.
Yeah.
So kind of the love and desire in the conceptions are kind of being messed up.
Yes.
later. That's a problem. That's the injustice.
That's right.
That's why Plato was needed to define what the desire is, why the desire is separated into three parts.
That's right.
So
That's right.
and we went all the way from the book 1 to book 4.
Yes.
I feel like I understood. Yeah.
Great. Well, should we break there? Somebody's understanding. So we'll come back in 15 minutes at 11? Okay.
刑事ってなんていうの？刑事イエスは刑事。
刑事リベレーション
刑事上学の刑事ですか。
刑事
表す。
現れてくる
リベレーション
神の
これからリベレーションかな。
Revelation
刑事。
なんか神が
神の
なんか
啓示
落ちてくるみたいな
うん
やつですかね。
リベレーション
ディバインレベレーション
エピファニーとかも
あ
言いますね。
あエピファニー
うん
神の国で
はいと書いてある。いや、アップルです。
その違いわかんないです
はいちょっと今日の後半はですね、お二人の対話をというか質疑を中心に、いろんな展開になると思いますけどね。
So later it's not that you two are going to converse and
Yes.
we are kind of listening and maybe having our thoughts.
Okay.
So based on your two of your dialogue.
どうぞ始めて。
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting. And we discussed about for example, the slash between 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
Let's say 3, the part 3, it's something beyond. Okay, that's I think all of us could understand.
Yes.
But beyond, that means it's, or can we say, is it sensible? Is it perceivable? No. So, 1 and 2 could be, and we can feel, we can, well, let's say we can see.
Maybe I misunderstood you. So we can see food,
Mm-hmm.
and we can see family,
Yeah.
but we can't see the real good. And so the object of 3 cannot be seen, whereas the objects of 1 and 2 can be seen. But it sounds, I think now that you're talking about feeling from within. We can feel from within the drive for these things. We can feel from within the drive for these things. And we can feel from within the drive for this. So in that sense, it's perceivable. The object is not perceivable, but the drive is perceivable.
Right, it's perceivable.
And I think we're feeling it right now. Why are we in this room? Are we here to make money? Are we here to get respect?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we here to get knowledge?
Yeah. Okay. Then about the, how to say, object of reality. In that, how to say, could we have a common sense of that knowledge? It means from her, for her, for me, is that the same object?
Yes.
Plato must be said so, yes, yeah.
Yes.
It is real good.
Yes.
But is that, so, okay, then how did Plato realize that is the real? Does it make sense?
Well, I could hear it meaning two things, what you're asking. How did he believe that there was such a thing? That would be one question. And the second question would be, how did he know what it was?
Oh, yes.
Which one?
Okay, in this part, second one.
The second one.
Yeah.
I don't think he knew what it was.
Oh,
I think this is a philosophy of describing this longing we have without
yeah.
telling us what the goal is.
Oh, that is just longing.
There's longing for a thing. There has to be a thing, otherwise the longing would be in vain. But we don't know what it will be. It'd be as if you've never been to Pittsburgh
Mhm.
and you have this longing to go to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Let's imagine.
Yeah.
But you've never been there.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't make sense to have that longing and also admit there's no such thing. You could say, well, then you could say, well, I have this longing to go to this place that doesn't exist. Poor me, but a terrible longing to have, a longing to go to a place that doesn't exist. But then the next step would be, I have a longing to go to this place. I'm confident that it exists, but I
Don't know what it's like, I've never been there. That's why I want to go. That's the position Plato's in. People often think he's in some third position where he knows exactly what Pittsburgh is like, and he's saying you should go there, but then he's strangely not telling you what it's like.
What? Then Plato, Plato did not write about the wisdom, but the content of
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I think it's Mushin. I don't think that there is content to it.
but
I thought I was using your term for no mind.
Yeah.
It's not that the real good is the following 10 sentences, and if you understand those, then you'll know the real good. That's not what it's like. It's not something that can be conceptualized. It's of a different order.
Yeah, different order.
Did I mispronounce that word, Mushin? Okay.
ちょっとまとめを入れてほしい。
As I was reading your book,
ちょっと今までの議論ちょっと
いや
簡単に
まとめる。
まとめる。
じゃあ僕が理解した、
先
僕が理解した範囲で、
あ、はい、この方が。
だからウィズドムの内容についてはプラトンは語らないと言った。それ大丈夫かな、もう一回確認して。だからなんだ、リアリティをロンギングする、なんていう望んでくる、これはある。でも最終的なここについては語っていない。
Well, he wants to confirm that the longing for that is there, we have it,
yes,
but he doesn't, he says that it's there, but he doesn't really explain what that is.
that's correct.
Talk anything,
Well,
nothing about it.
in book 6, he talks a bit about it. So I'll say a few things, just for a minute or two, about what happens in book 6. So that, because I think it will help our conversation. So, a desire, that's even worse than the others. Okay, that's also
No,
quite-
それまあ
Black one.
ちょっと
新しいから、なんか入れなきゃいけないですよね。
押せな
押せたらいいの。
So I'm just using object for the goal,
いや
okay? And so I desire money, money's the object, I desire the money. And then knowing is a certain kind of desire, and its object is truth, especially truth about the real good. That makes it sound like this is a thing like money, or, a bouncing ball, or a marker. So here's an object. I have sight. I see the object. It's a very distinct thing. I have a faculty of exercise. We've set up this dichotomy where knowing has an object, and that makes it sound like knowing and the real good are in a relationship just like seeing and a marker. But here's the new part. In book 6, he says the good, which is the real good, capital G, is beyond being
おい
in rank and power. Beyond being, another way of saying that in English is it transcends. Here's a quick way to think about this. Imagine you're a fish swimming in the ocean. You've got other fish, those are objects. You've got seaweed, those are objects. You've got coral, those are objects, and you see those. You don't see the ocean. The ocean is just the environment in which it's possible to see anything. That's what the real good is. That's what the good is. If the other fish are beings, the seaweed, they're beings, the coral are beings, the ocean is beyond being. The ocean makes it possible for there to be swimming and seeing in the first place. The real good is like that. You don't see it the way you see anything else. You don't even think about it. It would be if you're swimming deep in the ocean, you don't see the ocean. You just become aware of, all this time I've been swimming in an ocean. That's what epiphany for Plato is becoming aware of the conditions of just being alive at all.
The capital good.
The capital good. And that's why I called it mushin, in the sense of ushin, having a mind, is focusing on the fish or the seaweed or the coral. Mushin allows you overcome the concentration on the particulars and you are aware of the ocean.
Oh, amazing. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
今のところ無心についての本を彼に渡したので、無心ってだから心があるはものをフォーカスしてみる。無心はいわばなんていう広く見る。で、彼の今の理解はプラトンがその本当のリアルグッド、大文字のグッドを見るときは無心の心と重なると同じそういうふうに理解した。
Like the sun in the allegory of the cave, which in book 6 he devotes just an allegory to the sun. The sun is responsible for any seeing at all. You know, you can look at the sun, but you can look at this, you can look at this, only because there's light from the sun in the first place. Moreover, these things only exist because there's a sun in the first place. And so seeing the sun is not like seeing anything else. You're seeing the source of everything.
Yeah, like a metaphor of light.
Yes.
We do not see the light.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And so coming out of the cave,
Yeah.
you're not doing the same thing you were doing at the bottom of the cave, but just doing it towards better things. You're doing a completely different thing.
Okay, but in this metaphor, cave,
Yes.
People could go out of the cave,
Yes.
and could they see reality?
In the Mushin sense that we've been discussing.
Yeah, but how do you say? Okay, one more. Could they see, recognize reality outside of the cave? Did Plato say so?
Let me try an answer from the left field. Do you know this expression?
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned Suzuki, D.T. Suzuki.
Yeah.
I have not read him, but I've read Alan Watts, who refers to Suzuki a lot.
Yeah.
And Alan Watts reports that he asks Suzuki, what is enlightenment like?
Enlightenment.
And he said, Suzuki said, it's like everyday life, but you're just gliding 2 inches above the surface of the earth. So it's very similar to everyday life, it's just got a different character. That's what leaving the cave is like. It's not like you go from this place to some completely different place. It's just an allegory.
Yeah,
What he's saying is, you're in the same place, but you see it now in a different light.
今の分かったなんていうの大拙鈴木という禅の人が語ったって言うんだけど、なんていうの 普通の現実を見るんだけど、2インチ少し上
上から見る
浮いてるか
浮いて見てる
浮いて見てる感じ。だからそれはエンライトメントをもし覚醒悟りと理解すれば、悟りって何かと言ったらば普通の日常をこうちょっと浮いてみることだと答えだ。はい。
Thank you.
So, okay, I think you, what shall I say? I feel very close what you are thinking. It means I could make questions. For me, I thought the Platon system, what shall I say? The Christianity, Platon, I thought the wisdom love could be close to faith, belief, or the reality is a divine, is a theology, realm of theology. I thought. How do you think that?
Well, in this course and in others, I usually simplify by saying just take out one of the O's and talk about God.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything really has changed.
Yeah.
But it's a different understanding of God from the Christian God, or at least the typical, where the Christian God is a person, a particular being. And then you have a relationship with that particular being. In this understanding, that's you. And it's not a being. Just like you're swimming in the ocean, this is taking you too far. It's as if you are the ocean.
Oh, that's very familiar for me or for us.
Yes. Just as when I was reading your book, it's very familiar to me.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say very, it's familiar.
But it's not a Christian orthodox or orthodoxical
Yeah,
doctrine.
yeah. So, in the history of thought, one thing I think happened is that Aristotle and then Christianity have given us a false understanding of Plato.
Wow. Why?
In what way?
Well, starting with Aristotle. So Aristotle was Plato's student for 17 years. Can you imagine having a student for 17 years? He knew him very well. And yet, there are times when Aristotle criticizes Plato, and you just think, how in the world could you have studied with someone for 17 years and not understood that? You've had students, presumably, who are very smart, and you like each other, and you work for a long time, but you realize, like, there are certain things that they will never understand, and it can go the other way as well. And so I think there are just certain things about Aristotle he just can't understand about Plato. Now you've asked for examples and I haven't given them, I'll try and give you some. But I think this is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Aristotle needs everything to be a being. And if the most important thing in Plato's philosophy is the good, which is beyond being, Aristotle could never understand Plato.
Wow.
And then Christianity, especially Roman Catholicism, uses Aristotle. But that's Roman Catholicism. The big schism in the Christian church happens in roughly 1000 AD between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, and so on, they're more Platonic, and the Roman Catholic Church is more Aristotelian.
Okay, then the term idea,
Yes.
idea,
Yes.
is that beyond being?
No. So
Oh,
being, so enai is the Greek from which we get idea, which is what you're talking about.
oh, yeah.
So in English, idea or form, the forms, the beings, the ideas, the realities. Oh, this is a nice one. That's your personal one, is it? No, where did it come from? Ah, okay. Yes, whereas the good is beyond all these things.
What? Then the capital good
Yes,
is beyond idea.
yes. Yes.
Oh, I thought good is an idea.
He calls it the form of the good.
What?
He calls it the form of the good in English. So the idea of the good. Okay? So that makes it seem like it's an idea, like the idea of the water bottle, the idea of the watch, etc. But it can't be, because then he says it's beyond being. And he's quite clear that the beings are the ideas, the reality. So to say the idea of the good is beyond the ideas, that makes no sense. It has to be just this notion of beyond being. Let me just say something about this. For 10 years, just as a student and then as a young professor, I had no idea what that meant in the sense. He's saying something exists, and then he's saying it's beyond existence. That makes no sense. And it doesn't make any sense. Being has two meanings in English. This is that it is, what it is. So you might ask me, do you have a pet? That's asking me, is there a thing that is my pet? And I could say yes. But then there's another question. What kind of pet do you have? Cat, dog, so on. That's the essence of it. What is it? Those are two different questions to ask. Does something exist? Versus what kind of thing is it? And Plato distinguishes these. He's not a scholastic philosopher. He's not even Aristotle, who really starts the distinguishing of the fancy terms. Plato has these notions, though, and when he says the good is beyond being, he's not saying it's beyond existence. That doesn't make any sense. If you say it exists, then you can't say it's beyond existence. He's saying it's beyond essence, which is to say it has no character. And when we think, and this again is getting into books 5 and 6, when we think according to Plato, what our mind does is find the essence of something. So if you want to think about courage, well, there are the instances of courage. Like, what did this guy do on the battlefield? What did this person do in the hospital? And so on. And then you find the essence. What is it that all of those things have in common that makes them instances of courage? And then if your mind can fix on that essence, then you understand. Understanding is taking the essence into your mind. When Plato says the good is beyond essence, he's saying you can't understand it because there's no thing, there's no essence for your mind to assimilate. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a relationship with it, because it still exists. You have to have a relationship with it that's not what we understand of as knowledge, namely assimilating essences. And that's what I was trying to get at with the fish in the ocean. The fish has a way of relating to things in the ocean. It's sight. It sees other fish, it sees seaweed, it sees coral. That's like the mind sees the essence of the water bottle, courage, and so on. But that doesn't mean it has no relationship with the ocean. It obviously has a relationship with the ocean. That's its whole life is just swimming in the ocean. And when it lets go of looking at particular things, then it can become for the first time aware of the fact that it's in an ocean. And what Plato is saying, I think, at the summit of philosophy, after having thought about essences, what is justice, what is courage, what is what, etc., etc., then going beyond that to a communion with the possibility of there being any things at all. And that's the sun or the real good or whatever it is that makes it possible for there to be beings. I forget what I went into lecture mode, I'm sorry.
今のところ厄介だけども、なんていうの、だから善だよね。最高の善はなんだろう、これでいくとなんだろう、あるを超えちゃってるってわけだろ。そうすると善はあるのかないのかっていうふうな言い方したときに、なんていうの、なんていうの、あるとも言えないな、超えてる。でも普通と少なくとも僕がプラトン習った時には善はあるものだ。だからこれはイデアだ。
Oh, idea, yes, that's right.
イデアと言ってた。
Yeah, idea. Essence, idea, form.
いや
These are all the same.
いや
Yeah.
だからそれがビーイングでしょ。
Yes,
だ
yes.
けどビヨンドビーイングだからイデアですらない。ビヨンドイデア。
Yes.
そうなんていうの、no words,
No words, no concepts, no definitions.
いや
まあ、なんか本にも実在と書いてるよね。その善のイデアとかは。
実在。
実在じゃないってことやね。
そうだね。それで言えばね。
なるほど。
それで言えばね。
なるほ
So I wanted to say something I said to Yoko earlier, or whoever was with us at the time, that I'm not a great Plato scholar, but I have studied with the best Plato scholars in the West. And they know so many things about Plato and Aristotle and so on that I don't know. But just take the best one, in my opinion. Gerson is his name. But Reeve is another. So he was my supervisor, my dissertation, and I've worked with him. It doesn't matter. The point is, they've written books and books. You will never find any reference to this phrase in their books. They never mention it. Because they can't make any sense of that. And, you know, they're aware that he says it, but they laugh. Like, I've been drinking wine with them, and I bring it up, and they laugh, and they're just like, well, Plato got out of control sometimes. Plato was a mystic sometimes. They see it as like Plato was being careless instead of the way I see it, which is that's what he was trying to say the whole time. Like, that's the most important thing in his whole philosophy.
なんつったらいい、哲学界でこれは市民権を得てるかって聞いて。
So, I think he's kind of confirming that what you just said or what they are studying, does it have its own status in the world of philosophy in America?
Does what they're saying?
Yes. Do they
It's
have
not only
voice?
it's not only got its own status, that is the height of study of Plato in America.
So that is the highest. they
Yes.
have the high reputation
Oh, they, yeah.
of the study of
Awards and
Plato.
prizes and prestigious positions and book awards and so on. And they're very valuable scholars and books and so on. I'm not criticizing them, except that the most important thing, they have nothing to say about it. They ignore it completely. And when I bring it up to them casually, they act like, oh, well, Plato made a mistake.
じゃあ、あなたが発言は市民権を得るかって聞いて。
And how about you?
Well, I'm not a great Plato scholar. I saw that and I realized, like, that's not, if you really want to understand Plato, you can't go that route.
You mean that what you just explained to us, what kind of thought you have about Plato, is it listened to by the scholars, Plato scholars?
Not really,
in
no.
general?
I haven't really tried it. You know, I'm not
You
going to
haven't
waste.
tried?
I'm not going to waste my time.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
It's not my goal. I don't want the status in the profession. Like that's what I'd have to go to the conferences and publish in the journals and so on. And I have other things I try to do in my life. In a perfect life, I'd do those things too, but I only have so much time.
But why aren't they pointing out the most important aspects?
Well, they don't think of it as the most important.
Uh-huh.
They think, I mean, if what philosophy is finding the essences of things, then when he says the most important thing is to go beyond the essences, well then that's just sort of like keep crashing the computer at the last second.
Mm.
今のところいいだから多分ねかなりなんていうの独特なにプラトン理解をしてくださってる。でそれは中川先生に近い。で中川先生っていうのはだからある種東洋的な理解に近い。いや僕の理解今から聞くけどもおそらくこの理解は神秘主義的だっていうふうに批判されるんだと思う。だからキリスト教の世界においては危険になる。なぜってグッドをガードにすれば God is beyond being 実在を超えちゃってるっていうかだから神は実在するかに対して神はない、あるとかないとかと言えないっていう言い方になっちゃう。こんなこと言ったら怒られる。神は実在する。Did you have experience to be criticized as a mysticism?
Yes.
You
So I wrote my dissertation with this man who was a friend at the time, still is a friend, but I'm the only student he ever had. Again, I don't know if you want to film this. Can you turn this off?
止めてください。
You see? You see?
Okay. Yeah. And we are so how to say familiar to that.
Yes.
idea.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you know, how could I have been trained in an environment like that and yet still find this familiar? It's got to be my father. I was raised by my father who has this connection with Japan and Asia generally. I think I just sort of grew up with this. I'm not saying that he read the Analects to me or something, but just growing up in that environment, this is natural to me.
Yeah, we can guess.
Yes.
Okay. Back to Plato
Yes.
again. About memory.
Yes.
Did he discuss something about memory concerning about this
Yes.
topic?
Yes. Yes. So this came up very early in the course. I don't know if you were there on the day when it came up. It was the first day, actually, so you weren't there.
Oh.
Shunya brought up the Meno paradox.
Meno.
Meno paradox.
You know.
Meno.
Meno. Yeah. So I'm happy to do it again because it's so simple but so deep. Meno's the name of the dialogue by Plato, also the name of the main character. He's the one who brings up this paradox. Or Socrates brings it up in conjunction with him. And the paradox is this. Well, at least here's a version of it that can help you appreciate it quickly. If I say, I have to pick a different word. Well, I'll use the word I used last time, so you're familiar. If I say, can you help find my parapluie? My parapluie. Can you help me find it? No. Parapluie. It's a French word, don't worry, you don't know it. I tried to pick a word at the time that nobody in here would know. It means umbrella. But if I said, can you help me find my parapluie, you just look at me like, I don't know how to help you. There's nothing in my mind when you ask me to help you find your parapluie. But if I say, can you help me find my umbrella? Well, then you're able to help me because I say umbrella, you remember some images of what umbrellas look like. And then we look around the room, and if something on the floor looks like the images in your mind, then you can help me. So if learning is searching for knowledge, well, you can't learn anything new. That would be like learning to find your parapluie when you don't know what that is. You already have to know what it is that you're looking for. And that's the paradox. And Socrates' solution to the paradox is, you're right. We never learn anything we don't know. We already know everything. We're merely remembering what we've forgotten. And whatever plausibility that has about other things, I think it's a much better argument than it's given credit for. I believe it, actually. But whatever its value for all kinds of things, I think in the end, all that matters for Plato is that there's one thing that we remember, and that's this. In other words, when we're being summoned to go beyond being by Plato, we're not being asked to go out to something he's not saying go to the Andromeda galaxy where you've never been before. There are all kinds of problems with that, but one of them is that you don't know where that is, or you don't know what he's talking about. But this, if he's correct that learning is not finding something new, it's remembering what you already have. When he summons you to go beyond being, he's summoning you to remember something that you already knew. And so the fish, and I'm switching the analogy now, the fish is not being asked to notice the ocean for the first time, but to notice the ocean for the second time or the third time or whatever. It's always been there. It's not like the instructor to the fish is saying, I'm going to show you something totally crazy and foreign and out in the middle of the universe. And I'm going to show you something so close to you, so intimate to you, that the moment you notice it, you'll realize it was always there. And I think that's what Suzuki is talking about with the 2 inches above the ground. It's not, you're not going to some strange planet. You're not going to become some kooky mystic and so on. You're going to be the same person. It's just that now you're going to see it was always there.
このパラドックスは面白いと思って、人は全く新しいことを知るってことはできないんだったらね、常に知ってる。So, in this meaning, learning is equal to notice, aware, being aware.
Yeah, remembering.
Remembering.
But remembering is, it's fine as
first pass, but the problem is it makes it sound like, well, there was this sentence I used to know, and now I'm going to remember that sentence. Noticing is even better, I think. You don't remember the ocean when you're swimming. You notice the ocean.
Mm.
Take the experience of meditation, where the goal, as I understand it, I mean, there are different types, of course, but the goal, as I understand it, is to detach from attachments. So I think of this, that's fine, but I just let that thought drift away, and then this desire or this fantasy, things come up, and in each case I let it go. So that I train myself after a while to notice the life that's underneath all of the particular fantasies, desires, attachments, and so on. If that life is experienced as, well, if meditation is something good, in the sense of you do that often enough that you become more aware of that life, well, that could only be good if that life were good. Let me put it by contrast. What if the world is the trick of the devil? What if the more aware you become of reality, the more you realize this is just a big game that a demon is playing on us? Well, then meditation would be a terrible thing to do. You would just become more and more aware of how horrible things were. So I think the promise in meditation is that there's a goodness to life, so that if you can detach from the superficial attachments and then notice the deep pulse of life, you will have a joy because life is good. And I think that's what Plato's saying by calling this the good. This life beyond being will make you happy.
ちょっと今の言われてる瞑想の時ね、瞑想
のこと、瞑想するっていうことをするっていうのはやっぱり何かどんどん自分の中の先入観のようなものとかどんどん例を取っていってだんだんと何かこの世界っていうものが良いものだっていうことに気づいていくっていうことなので、どこかそこの背後には良いもので世界はできていると考えていいですかね。良いものがあるっていう考え方があるからメディテーションっていうものが機能するっていうのか。もし逆に悪しか世界にないとすれば、メディテーションするっていうことは世界がいかにひどいもので出来上がってるかとすることを目的にしていくことになってしまうっていうので、メディテーションっていうものがやっぱりそのグッド、その善なるものっていうものと結びついているっていうふうに言えるんじゃないだろうかっておっしゃってるかと思います。はい。
Patrick, yes.
You talked about the Matrix the other day, right?
The Matrix, the film?
The Matrix, the film.
Yes.
Does this relate?
Well, it certainly relates to Plato's cave, that the people there are living in an illusion, and the goal is to escape because the illusion is a prison, they're being tricked. But it has nothing to do with the spiritual dimension that we're discussing, because when they escape, they realize how horrible things are. There's no goodness in the world outside of the Matrix.
Whereas Plato's saying you escape and you realize how good it is.
Just realize the reality.
In the
In the
Matrix.
Matrix.
That's right. Yeah, the Matrix is like the cave where they escape and they see the puppeteers. And then they can go back down and rescue people and like shatter the puppet show. But they don't go out to a place of joy and contemplation. Same for the Truman Show. Yeah.
Truman Show.
Yeah.
Truman Show, I don't remember that one, but
Yeah.
マトリックスって映画知ってます。キアヌ・リーブスの。
聞いたこと
はい
がある。
キアヌ、これなんかこのプラトンの話が出た時に必ずマトリックス出てくる。だけども今言ってくれたのはマトリックスのあの世界が表しているのはそのケーブの外に出るのではなくって、この操り人形のパペットショーを見てる段階、そことの行ったり来たりをしてるだけで、その外にあるものまではマトリックスの世界の中には入っていない。
Yeah, those are, adaptations of Plato for materialistic culture, where this third thing is not part of the map. It's just, how do you get through bad versions of these?
とても有物論的に世界を見たときにのみ成り立つ。So it's more like, I don't know if it's right, but Marx.
Yeah.
Way of looking at how the reality, how they are being offered.
Yeah. No, I mean, Marx came up a lot earlier for some reason, and if we get to books 8 and 9, he'll come up again. I think of Marx as Aristotle without God. So, as I mentioned, he was a scholar of ancient Greek philosophy, but that would probably get too much into. Well, no, very quickly, if it's interesting to you. Aristotle has this notion of an activity. Energia is the Greek. And then there's praxis, which you probably heard. And then there's poiesis. Production. Practice. So this is just Aristotle. I haven't done anything specific to Marx. And so just sticking with Aristotle for the moment, a production is where I have a goal and I do something and I accomplish the goal and then it's over. So my goal could be throw away this marker. I have a production, I throw it away, done. And if I want to do another production, I find another marker, I throw it away. An activity, by contrast, is something that you do where the goal is the doing itself. So like, an example that will help you to think of this would be a walk after dinner. Here I walked to get rid of the marker, I threw it away, then I was done. Versus I eat a dinner and then I want to go for a walk. I walk. I'm not walking to do a particular thing, I'm walking for the sake of the walking.
Is that activity?
Yeah, so internal goal is what we'll say. External goal. A practice is something that has both. So for example, fighting a battle. This is Aristotle's example. What is the goal of fighting the battle? Winning. So that's its external goal. But if you're a soldier, you don't want to win in any way. How do you want to win? If you're a samurai, think of someone with a real code. You want to win. I mean, since it's come up
since it's come up, there's winning a war by dropping thousands and thousands of tons of bombs on the people of the nation, and then you win. That's what my country did to yours. That's winning, but that's dishonorable.
Oh, yeah.
The soldier wants to win with honor.
Yeah.
That's the internal goal.
Yeah.
To show you the difference, the throwing the marker away is the goal of my production. But if it's my goal and I'm teaching, I'm busy, can you throw that away for me? And then I keep teaching and then you do it for me? I can alienate it to somebody else because it's an external goal. You then throw it away. But walking after dinner, I'm really busy. Can you do the walking after dinner for me? It doesn't make any sense. I'm doing it for its own sake. So similarly, I can get somebody else to win my battles, but I can't win them in an honorable way that gives me honor unless I fight them. Anyway, that's Aristotle. Marx, what Marx notices is that, I'll just say a bit more about Aristotle. Aristotle thought that the only activity that meets this criterion is contemplation of God. Now that's a whole other story about why he thinks that. We can talk about it if we have time. But he thinks that's the only thing that's a real activity. To give you a sense of why, I go for a walk after dinner. Well, I'm doing that to kind of enjoy the evening and so on. That's why I don't do it forever. Because, well, I get tired and it gets dark and I have to go to the bathroom and I run out of energy and so on. It's actually a kind of production hidden as if it were an activity. He thinks that the only activity that's completely self-sufficient in every moment is contemplation of God, because that's the only one that has no deficiency whatsoever, for what it's worth. He thinks that to do this, as a result, you need reason at its highest register. And so only free men, namely philosophers, are going to be able to do this. This can be done by anyone, because the slave, even if he can't decide what the point of the production is, the master can tell him, here's what I need you to do. In other words, the master sets the goal, and then the slave accomplishes the goal, because the goal can be separated. And so Aristotle's master-slave distinction and his politics is based on this difference. And Marx noticed that, and then he recognized our society under industrial capitalism is becoming production. Namely, everything is about making something so that you can make the next thing, so that you can make the next thing. And if the meaning of life is found in activity, then life under capitalism becomes meaningless. I've had to really simplify it. I've left this out and so on. Why did we get on to Marx?
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Why did we do that?
Because of the matrix.
The matrix, yes. Yes. Oh, and then I said, you brought up Marx, and I said, yes, those films are kind of Marxist in the sense that these oppressed people in The Matrix or Truman in The Truman Show, they recognize at a certain point, I'm being oppressed and I want to escape the oppression. That would be like being the slave to production in a capitalist society, realizing, well, I'm not going to be oppressed anymore. That's what Marx is recommending. But he's Aristotle without God, because Aristotle would think, yes, escape production so that you can contemplate God. But Marx is an atheist. There's no God to contemplate, so it's not clear what you do after you escape alienation and production. And that's when he says, well, you'll fish in the morning and you'll garden in the afternoon, and then you'll criticize literature in the evening. It's like, well, you do these things that are kind of pleasant for a while, forever. There isn't a goal.
Oh, sorry. Back to the
Yes,
key,
yeah.
key sentence.
Yes.
Where
So it's book
Could you-
6.
yeah.
Let's see.
Book 6.
Oh, here again, I wish I had my. Tell you what I'm gonna do.
訳が全然違うんじゃない
そうでしょうね。そうでしょうね。わあ、すごいですね。
509
ナンバー509。
Yeah, 509B.
B
9の
B の最後
9の P の最後ああその実在の差
Yeah, there you go. I'll give you the diagram.
これどこの役員を探してますっけ？ローザ？ローザン？ Where are we looking for?
The good is beyond being in rank and power.
509の最後読んでも何もわからない
いやこれ実在じゃなくてなんかエッセンスに近い方の訳語じゃないとおかしいってことです。
ビヨンドビーン書いてはいるよね。
一応その実在のさらに彼方に書いてある
これ自分で訳してるよね。
あ、この先生
自分で翻訳してる。
So here's the picture.
Oh,
This is called, so at this stretch from the end of 6 through 7, there are 3 famous images. And they are the sun, the line, and the cave. We spent the first day on the cave. All the cave does is take these 2 and combine them. And so tomorrow or next Tuesday we'll do the line, but now we can do the sun since we're here. It's an analogy. So there's a visible realm, namely what we see here. There's a sun, which is shining light. And that shining of that light makes it possible for us to see objects of sight. In this case, the tree. So we have an eye, which, deprived of light by the absence of the sun, couldn't see this. So this makes possible the vision of this. It also makes possible the existence of this. He's got a vision that's not far from the truth, which is that everything in our solar system comes from the sun. Every planet is some fragment of the sun. That's sort of the idea. And certainly, you don't even need a planetary physics. Just things grow only because of the light of the sun. So the sun is responsible for their existence or their being. So that's the visible realm. And the whole point of the image is to help us understand the intelligible realm, the spiritual world, the world of understanding. There's something in us, if this is our body, there's a part of our body that allows us to see. So too, there's a part of our soul which allows us to understand. We've now done the psychology. There are other parts of the soul. But it's reason especially that he's concerned with, because reason has the true object, which is being or reality. Unlike this middle part of the soul called the spirited part, which is interested in status, or the appetitive part of the soul, which is interested in money. That's what we did before the break. Well, it's only because the good shines truth in the way that the sun shines light that we are able to understand being or reality. Just as it's only because the sun shines light that we can see trees. But also, it's only because the sun shines light that there's a tree in the first place. The sun creates this and then makes it visible. The good creates this and then makes it understandable. But it is beyond being. In rank, it's of a higher nature, but in power, namely, it makes possible the existence and the intelligibility of this. That's why it's beyond it in power. And the whole point of philosophy, turns out, in books 6 and 7, is to understand this. But if understanding is this, then what does it mean? That's where I think Mushin comes in. This is all, well, it's not ordinary mind, but it's intellectual effort and categories, definitions, and so on. This has to be beyond ordinary mind. Because without that, the point of all this is lost. I mean, put it in absolutely simple, practical terms, you could have somebody who has memorized all the encyclopedias, who has the definition of everything, can do every math equation, etc., etc., etc. But if they've never had an encounter with the foundation of everything, which Plato is presuming is good, they won't know what the value of any of that is. They won't know how to use it in the service of this.
In the service of good.
Yes.
How did you say? In the
Yes.
service of good.
Yes.
True could be heaven. How in the service of good,
Yes.
reality or being can come into
That's right.
existence. That,
Well, reality and being are already coming into existence, and then when we get there, we can use them. And we can use them randomly, because it would have to be random if we have no acquaintance with this. Or, by coming into acquaintance with this, we can use them, and I said, in the service of this.
だからいや訳も間違いではないわけね。その通りに。でも意味の通じ方。
I thought of one more thing to say. There's the production or the creation of the world from this good. And then there's reason, us, which can look up towards this So there's a flowing out, and then there's a turning back. And this was called by later Platonists the road up and the road down. And when Heraclitus was seen as a prophet of Platonism, the road up and the road down are the same. I find that, to me, that's one of the most exciting thoughts in this whole system. Because I mentioned to you what the field of Plato's scholarship ignores, namely the beyond being. But I think the history of Platonism has ignored something. All the focus has been on contemplation of God. That's the road up. But there hasn't been a focus on producing in light of the good, which is to say the road down. There's been, I think, a false stereotype that the Platonist is like an ascetic who has given up on the world and only to focus on the good. And I think there's a place for that. That would be the sort of pure road up, but that's only one side of the story. The whole point of escaping the cave is to come back down into the cave. So that's why Yoko and Hiroka, I mentioned when you drove me back, I think that's when it was, that I'm not interested in Plato scholarship, first of all because people are doing it much better than I am, but also because there's this huge gap. Namely, what can we do with Plato for now? I see that as the road down. Namely, how by engaging with what's going on right now, using Plato, can we understand? Which would mean in light of this. And I've given you an example. In politics, for example, it would be something has gone wrong in our politics, where whether it's Marx or capitalism, if I had a moment, I'd talk about our Fukuyama friend. Maybe I will, just to finish up. It's always missing this. It's trying to do justice without the whole point, which is the good. I'll tell you what our friend Fukuyama did wrong. He understood that Plato's soul had three parts. He understood that there's an appetitive part, the money-loving. He understood that there's a spirited part, the honor-loving. So far, he was right. And before I say where he went wrong, I'll just say his contribution in that famous book called The End of History in 1992. And for those of you who are too young, right before Soviet communism fell, first of all, those of us who were alive at the time just sort of assumed this is going to go on forever. That was the world that we were raised in. And it was just these two big empires, the American Empire and the Soviet Empire, and that's just the way it was going to be. And Fukuyama wrote this article called The End of History, ? Where he argued that liberal capitalism, the American model, would be the end of history because it solved all of the human problems. And so history was a working out of the problems of human life, and they would all eventually end up with liberal capitalism. And then the Soviet Union fell like 3 months later, and he was heralded as this huge prophet. Like, wow, we all thought the Soviet Union would last forever, and you predicted it would eventually fall on philosophical grounds. So then he wrote a book called The End of History, no question mark anymore. The End of History is the main part of the title, and The Last Man. By the way, the end of history is a reference to Hegel. Hegel's this German philosopher who thought that philosophy was working out contradictions through history and that it would eventually resolve them all, and Hegel thought he'd resolve them all and he was the end of history. Marx adopted Hegel's philosophy and thought, well, it's not about ideas, it's about modes of economics, and things are working themselves out through history until eventually the communist utopia, and then that's when we'll have the end of history. And Fukuyama was turning all that on its head and saying, no, the end of history is liberal, democratic capitalism. But, and this is the part people don't remember, and the last man, this is a reference to Nietzsche. Nietzsche in the 19th century saw that there were people in bourgeois, liberal, democratic nations who, you know, the young men especially, who felt like the spirit of adventure is gone. It's all about making money, being comfortable. And the last man was the idea of mediocrity forever. But there would be a rebellion against that by adventurous young men. That's where he got this. He said there's a part of our soul that wants honor, and even if liberal democratic capitalism is the best for making everybody rich, it can't satisfy this, and so it's always going to have to struggle with Nietzschean rebellions. Okay, well that's a whole other subject. I'll end now because the reason I brought this up is, what about the most important part of the soul? Reason. He understood reason as finding the means to your ends. So if I have an end, namely lunch, reason is what I use to calculate how to get lunch. This is the understanding of reason you get in a British philosopher, David Hume, from the 18th century. Does that sound anything like what we've talked about, the wisdom-loving part of the soul in Plato? No. It's not that Plato doesn't think you don't use your reason to find out the best place to go to lunch. Sure, but that's not what reason's about. What's reason for in Plato? And if you don't know this, then I failed today. I didn't come and teach the one thing I really wanted to teach. What's reason for in Plato? If wisdom is its virtue, so
Justice.
justice is when all the parts are working in harmony. So there's something particularly that reason does. What's that?
Somewhere good.
Yes, it focuses on what's really good, or God. That's totally absent here. What Fukuyama's done is he's plugged in this modern notion as a substitute for Plato. He's taken God out. Just like Marx took God out of Aristotle. It's what the modern philosophers just keep doing over and over again. Is they want to take this ancient wisdom but then leave the God part out. And I think the problems that follow necessarily. Because it's not like the ancient philosophers inserted God as a random afterthought. It was always the point.
So in Plato's idea, God is good. I mean,
Yeah.
big good.
Yes.
Big character.
Yes. Yes. And to be clear, he doesn't say God, he says the good.
The good. He
Yes.
never used the word God.
No, because, he's in a society that has its own theology. Lots of gods like Zeus and Hera and Aphrodite and so on. And look what happened to his teacher Socrates, who talked about having a daimonion. One of the two charges was you introduced gods that are different from the gods of the city. And I think Plato drew the lesson that you better be careful when you introduce a new god. People don't like that. And he wasn't just introducing any old new god, he was introducing the notion of monotheism.
Do you think people do not like the Plato saying God because they believe in Greek gods, or
That's right.
is that
That's
they're
right.
gods?
Yeah, or he never even gave them the chance to get angry with it. He just never provoked them. He just said the good. And it's so hard to appreciate what he's doing. He's inventing monotheism. One God. He's definitely inventing it for the Greeks, but I think he's inventing it, period. Nobody else in the West has this idea at that time. Maybe the Jews, maybe, but I'm not a scholar of the Hebrew literature, but I'm pretty much persuaded that even the Jews at this time had multiple gods. It wasn't until the Hellenistic period that they settled on one. And you felt it from the beginning. It was day 1 or day 2 of the course, and we were walking to lunch, and you said the thing about the Greeks that upsets you is this focus on the one. You didn't say God, but I think that's what you were after. And I said, it's not the Greeks, it's just Plato.
ちょっと一つ最後質問。そのゴッドというかグッドね、ソクラテスのダイモニオンとは関係ないのか。それがヒントになっていることあるのか。
Does that God or good in Plato, does that have something to do with the Socrates statement? Diamond?
He never makes the connection, no. No. I think Plato thought that's the one God, and then there are lots of minor gods. Yeah, it's not like Christianity where there's one God and no other gods. There's one big God, and then there are smaller gods. And so you can have little daimonia. Who knows, maybe even Greek mythology is kind of true. And the Roman Catholic Church is really funny about this because officially there's just one God. But then there are all these saints, and they treat them like they're gods.
And spirits are assassins.
Yeah, they have views of ghosts and all kinds of stuff. Demons, yeah. Angels.
But why the Aristotle and the Roman Catholic doesn't understand the goodness, like beyond everything?
I missed the first part. Why something?
He doesn't understand. Like, you mentioned that's Aristotle.
Oh, Aristotle.
Aristotle, yeah.
Okay. What does he not understand about Plato? Yeah, please, you leave any time. You want to know why do I think Aristotle doesn't understand Plato?
Yeah, like talking about the goods. Yeah. And Roman Catholic as well. If you touched on that. You touched on that, right?
Oh, so the Roman Catholic Church in the 13th century assimilated Aristotle. And Thomas Aquinas is the big philosopher of the Roman Catholic Church, and the underpinning of his philosophy is Aristotle. And it's funny because his teacher, Aquinas' teacher, introduced Aristotle into discussion. And at first it was heretical. It was banned. Because Aristotle taught that the world has no beginning, for example. Or Aristotle thought the soul is not immortal. At any rate, they overcame that, and then he becomes basically the unofficial philosopher of the Catholic Church. And what I said offhand at that point in the course was Aristotle's misunderstanding of Plato means that when Catholics approach Plato, they read him as, well, failing in some respect, in the ways that Aristotle thought he was failed. And then now you're asking me, how did Aristotle think Plato failed? There are a number of ways. He rejected, let me give you an example. So, are you familiar with this word epistemology?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I try not to introduce fancy words, but I think this will help. It's the study of knowledge. It's an understanding of what knowledge is. And so next Tuesday, we're going to do books 5, 6, and 7. And the two big topics of those books are epistemology and ontology, which is the study of being. And they go together because when you know something real, something that is. If it's not real, you can't know it. Okay. Well, there are all kinds of problems in epistemology. Like, how do we learn? And Aristotle knew what many of these problems were, and he tried to give his own solutions. So how do we learn? Well, Aristotle thought you collect data, and you can see this in his texts. He's much more empirically minded. Plato's more meditative, if you like, more mystical, and Aristotle's more empirical and logical. And again, I don't think Plato's illogical, it's just that at certain points he recognizes its limits. At any rate, Aristotle thinks the way you learn is you go into the world, you sense things, you collect generalizations about things, and then you form accurate generalizations, accurate laws, if you like. Maybe laws is not the right word. So there's sensation, and then there's generalization. And let's say I want to study swans. Well, I go out and I observe a bunch of swans. Those are my sensations. But there's a difference between a scientist of swans and somebody who just enjoys looking at swans. The scientist collects these and then goes to the next step, which is generalization. And this is, and then the question is, well, what's the difference? Aristotle, at this point, he switches to a metaphor. He says, it's like a battle where you have a bunch of straggling soldiers, and they're retreating, and they retreat into a narrow pass, and they form a battle line. And then once they form a battle line, then they can move forward and attack. Where the attacking would be applying the generalization. Like, let's say, for example, I observe a bunch of swans, then I form an understanding of swans. That would be forming the battle line. And then I make predictions about what swans will do, or I have solutions to swan farmers' problems. Swan farmers are saying, my swans are not reproducing. Oh, well, I understand swans. You need to make sure that the male and female swans interact at night, because that's when they reproduce, or whatever. Anyway, this is just pure metaphor. It's Posterior Analytics, second book, 19. This is this famous passage, and people crack their heads over it, like he's supposed to be this rigorous, empirically minded person. And when it comes time to explaining the most important question of epistemology, which is how do we learn, he says, it's like your observations are retreating soldiers, and they're retreating chaotically, and then one of them makes a stand, and then the others fall into line, and then they can advance. Pure metaphor. Doesn't really explain anything. Unless you were to say, well, why do they fall into line? What happens when they fall into line? He says nothing. Now, what does Plato think? You observe a bunch of things about swans, and then there is a moment when they fall into line. And what is that? It's when you remember the nature of swan, because you've seen that before. You were once, I'll simplify, you were once in God's company, where God showed you the whole world, and you can remember that. You might not like that explanation, you might think there are problems with that, but it's an explanation. That the reason this happens is because it's memory. Aristotle will never allow himself that explanation.
Just nothing.
Just nothing. Just nothing. I don't think there is anything. That's why in the end I think the Socrates' response to the Meno paradox is a good response. Because I've never heard another one that says anything. What is it that happens when people learn?
But in Aristotle's sense, if that's the case, it could be sophists. You know what I mean? Just
I may keep going.
yeah, just like generalization,
Yes.
like from the empirical studies, observations. According to Aristotle,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean anything. It just not. It's nothing.
Yeah.
Like, but in that sense, it could be anything. You know what I mean?
I think I do. Is this what you mean? That the sophists thought there is no answer to that question. There's just
Yeah.
like what people accept as knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if Aristotle wants to be a sophist, he should take off the Plato jersey and put on the sophist jersey. Those are two different teams.
Yeah. So Aristotle could be a sophist. I don't know.
He doesn't want to be.
Mm.
He wants to be a Platonic philosopher without the mystical stuff. And what I find is, without the mystical stuff, you slide back into sophistry.
Mm.
Yeah. This problem comes up again in 20th century philosophy with Wittgenstein. I don't know if Ludwig Wittgenstein is studied in Japan, but Wittgenstein had this problem about what is it to understand a rule. So I'll give you a series of numbers. 2, 4, 6, 8. Do you see the rule? If you see the rule, then you should be able to tell me what the next number is. What's the next number, Yoko? She's right. What's the next number?
12.
No, it's 11. Because the rule I had in mind was add 2 until you get to 10, then add 1. Now, your rule was what most people would expect. But I had a different rule in mind. There is no sequence of numbers I could possibly give you that would show you what rule I have in mind. Because for any sequence of number, there are infinitely many possible number of rules. And so what is it to follow a rule? Wittgenstein's answer was the sophistic answer. It's you just do what people do. And that means that learning is just doing what other people do. And what that means is, when you come into a conflict between desire type 2, wanting status, and desire for the truth, desire 3, you'll just do what'll get you status, because that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything for the sophists, and it doesn't mean anything for Wittgenstein either. Because following the rule is just doing what people have done. And if you don't do what people have done, they get angry. And they don't pay you your salary.
Did you say Wittgenstein?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You've heard of him. He's an Austrian philosopher from 20th century. Thank you.